people are like, oh, you must have a huge med kit because you got all this medical experience and all this, trauma and combat field triage. And I'm like, no, actually I don't. This is my entire possibles pouch. I try not to what if it to death. I try to plan for common contingencies for the environment, my experience level, etc.
What are those pieces that can do multiple things so you're not carrying 5 pounds of crap?
What do we have in the vehicle now to give us even more capability that we couldn't possibly realistically carry on our back?
I've got lights, I've got sunscreen, I've got duct tape, bug spray, little gas things for my stove. I've got just a standard axe, I've got another knife. This is my base camp.
I'm John Barklow. I'm the Senior Product Manager of Hunting at Sitka Gear.
I'm Christian Schauf. I'm the founder of a company called Uncharted Supply. So thanks for having me today. It's kind of fun.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about preparedness, first aid kits, kind of different layers of it, and what you carry, what I carry, maybe what the differences are, and what people should do, right?
Yeah, and I think what's so interesting is, you and I just having conversations is I tend to talk about and am focused on what I'm carrying in my pack.
Well, it makes sense because you live out of your pack. That's your home, right? With your job, that's what you've done for a long time. For me, I'm probably not doing that as much as you. And at Uncharted, what we think about is like layers. I always say the best camera is the one in your hand. It's the same thing with first aid kits. If you've got the best first aid kit in the world at home, but you can't get to it, you have nothing. When we build products, we think about stuff that you can have on you 24/7, all the way back to the big stuff that's vehicle borne or at your home or something like that. So that's how I always think about it. It's like, how do we make something that's so easy to carry? It's not a decision of, oh, this is too heavy, I don't want to do it today. It's just a no-brainer.
Well, and that's the biggest mistake I see people make when it comes to, carrying things in your pack is they either don't carry it, which I think is the single biggest mistake. Right. And it's amazing when I talk to groups and teach how many people don't carry a med kit or a possibles pouch or something to manage contingencies, I like to say. But then they kind of go to the other extreme, which is they what if it to death, and they carry so much and it's so large that when they're packing and it's like, well, do I bring an extra meal or some extra water or, another layer of clothing or the med kit, they always leave the med kit behind, right? It's the first thing left behind. So you have to figure out a kind of a medium ground, understanding that, you can come back to the vehicle, you just need this one thing to do this job, but these things need to work together.
Exactly. It's all about right place, right time with stuff. I had a guide that always said, just put that in the bottom of your pack, put that in the bottom of your pack. And I said, dude, how much stuff do you have in the bottom of your pack? It's like my whole kit. But yeah, we always want to take all this gear, but then you get slow, then you're burning calories, you're getting sweaty, you might get cold.
Right.
It's like you want to be light, you want to enjoy the moment, but you have to have that coverage.
Right.
So it's a balancing act. I mean, the other thing I would say to that is so many kits out there, this is something we think about when we build ours, is you'll buy a 500-piece kit. And like 500 Band-Aids never saved anybody's life. Mm-hmm. What you want is to cover as many things as possible once and then replenish it, right?
Right.
Like be lightweight, but have a bunch of diversity. It's almost like MacGyver. You always had like a bobby pin and some duct tape and a match and you could fix anything.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, what are those pieces that can do multiple things so you're not carrying 5 pounds of crap? It's just like a really lightweight kit that can solve whatever happens and get you back to the next stage.
People tend to look at med kits, survival kits, possibles pouches, all these things is like these hermetically sealed kits that you never work from. And the way I like to describe a med kit or a possibles pouch is these are toolboxes that you stock for, what you think you need. And that's going to really vary broadly depending on the person, the environment, a lot of things.
Right.
But that you work from these things, and when you come back, if you've expended the 3 Band-Aids or some fire, tinder, or whatever it may be, that you then replenish it, and then over time it continues to evolve. It may grow a little bit, it may shrink a little bit. Oh, I'm going to go to Alaska. Nope, now I'm going to go to hunt coos deer in Arizona, and that can modify. But people feel you should never touch that, and I think that's absolutely the wrong approach.
My buddy always said it's not a go bag, it's a go-to bag.
Oh, that's
like,
great.
I'm always digging in it. If it's your first time opening that kit and you've literally never looked in it, that's a much more disadvantageous position to be in than somebody that's used it and replenished it, like you said. So totally aligned with you there. Use that stuff, replenish it, get familiar with it, because someday that might save your life or someone you love's life.
The other thing that I see people commonly do is they try to build a kit with capabilities that they don't have. So people are like, oh, I'm going to carry an airway. I'm going to carry sutures. And I'm like, well, that's great. But do you have the capability? Are you really going to suture somebody up in the field? Are you really going to use a nasal pharyngeal airway? Like, is that really something you think you're going to run into? And so I like to say what if weighs a lot. And when you kind of limit it down to, or boil it down to, hey, what are the common scenarios that I'm going to run into that I can build this medical kit to? I think it makes it a lot more digestible. So some of the common things that I'm trying to build into my medical kit is things like, hey, I want to manage some pain. I want to manage some inflammation. So we're out hiking. Maybe we get dinged up crawling in on something. Maybe we twist our ankle. So we want to be able to manage those kind of things. Everybody's potentially going to have different allergies, right? So maybe a Benadryl. But if you're allergic to bee stings, maybe you need to carry an EpiPen. So you want to make sure that you can manage allergies. Maybe you're somebody who's highly allergic and reacts with rashes and breaks out in hives with poison ivy or poison oak, and that's kind of in the area you go. So you want to bring, you know, those creams that kind of cut down on that itching and swelling. You want to make sure you can do things like that. And then you want to make sure that you can manage, you know, slightly maybe more difficult things like cuts, scrapes, punctures. You know, are you an archery hunter where you're going to really deal more with lacerations and punctures? Are you gun hunting where, God forbid, there's a potential for somebody to have a gunshot wound? And at that point, you can begin to open that kit. But really what it comes down to is I want to make sure that I can manage sprains, strains, breaks, and then can I control bleeding? And really when you get to bleeding, that's where potentially you're talking about life and death. And there's lots of things to consider and a lot of different tools we can use to manage that bleeding. I think a lot of it comes down to, you know, what's your training or my training, right? Because I think that has something to do with it. What is our knowledge? Mm-hmm. And then that knowledge maybe relates to what tools we carry and our capability. The first thing that comes to me outside of like a minor, say, cut, right, or, you know, laceration or puncture is something that begins to bleed either in the backcountry or on the side of the road, right, where you need to manage and stabilize this wound. That direct pressure could be with gauze. Can this person clot with direct pressure and stop that bleeding? And maybe that's all you need to do. You know, maybe there's some other things, if that doesn't work, that we need to consider.
I think the tourniquet has entered the public psyche at a level where people think they need them. But to your point, if you haven't trained with them, it can actually be pretty dangerous. I mean, my perspective, it's a last resort. And you might be able to tell immediately if you need a tourniquet. If there's blood just gushing out, if there's a huge pile of blood, you can see the heartbeat of blood coming out, and you think that person's going to bleed out in a few minutes, that's where you want to go. But there's so many steps in between that I wish people would pay more attention to. Like you said, direct pressure all the way up to quick clot. There's some other tools here that we can use. And I think you've kind of got to have a couple things with you because most people aren't trained. And in most situations, you can probably solve it with something else before you get to a tourniquet and end up having to lose a limb or something else.
Literally, if you don't do something, that person will be dead within minutes.
Right.
So at that point, it's like, well, I almost don't have an option. Mm-hmm. But that's assuming you have either the tool and the experience to go with it. There's other things now that people don't necessarily need that training that may help them. And so one of them is quick clot. You know, I could put it on, you could maybe modify it, and then I can go and help somebody else potentially. Or if you're by yourself, it's easy enough for you to put it on and doesn't have the negative effects of, you know, an improperly applied tourniquet.
Yeah, and that's just the Slishman wrap. We saw this at Uncharted. We didn't design it.
Super lightweight, right? Super low profile.
You know, here's a Cat 5 tourniquet. Compared to this, it's lighter, it's smaller, and essentially it does more. But this guy is designed to do several things, and it's just a band with a bunch of Velcro attachments to it. First and foremost, like you said, maybe you've got some quick clot you've packed in there, and now you can wrap this around and have a space that's several inches wide covering the whole gash with a ton of pressure, which helps that quick clot do its job better. It also, you maybe have a broken bone. You can take this thing, you can put something stiff, a stick or something next to your leg. You could use this to wrap, to hold it on. There's just so many uses with this. And then as a tourniquet, it's just got a loop on the end. You put your arm through there, you pull it tight, and you just start wrapping. Yeah. And the nice thing about this is okay, maybe you didn't need the tourniquet. You can adjust the pressure. Maybe you need to crank it down more. But this thing is really tough, really durable. We've loved this design, and I think it gives people a lot more options and a really good between a Band-Aid that's not working and then clamping it off with a tourniquet.
What we're showing is there's a lot of different tools now that provide a broad range of capability, but understanding that managing bleeding, you know, obviously it's ABCs, right? Airway, breathing, circulation. We have to be able to manage that breathing. People often think that these things won't happen to them, or that they don't happen, right? And people are maybe just being a little paranoid. But, you know, I've had a buddy who was going through heavy brush, his arrow came out of the quiver, and however it happened, the arrow ended up stabbing him in the back of the calf. And it was a really bad puncture wound, right? That was difficult to control that bleeding, and he ultimately needed to be carried out of the field. The issues I've had are when it's the end of the day, you know, I've just got an animal on the ground, maybe I'm by myself, maybe it's inclement weather, maybe I'm trying to rush through, right? And these knives are so sharp now and efficient, and I'm quartering an animal and it slips, and the next thing you know, I've stabbed myself in the hand.
Yep.
You know, another friend of mine just in the last few years with, you know, one of these scalpel knives. Again, quartering up an animal, slips, stabbed that knife right into his thigh. Thank God he didn't cut his femoral artery, right? But these things happen, and they happen a lot more than any of us want to care to admit or even discuss, right? And I mean, you had an incident, what was it, last year or the year before, that was like really crazy.
This happened when I was ski touring with my dog, which we do every single day. The more frequently you do this and something hasn't happened, the closer you are to your number getting called.
Yeah.
And it happened. You know, we do it every day and nothing happens, and then one day he almost died. And so my buddy skied into him. It's just a mistake. They didn't see each other. They collided. And he comes running up to me, and he is spraying blood out of his forearm. Just with every step, just spraying the side of the mountain. And I had our little triage kit with. I had zip ties, I had duct tape, I had gauze, and I found a stick. And I made the best tourniquet I could, taped it down, put him on my shoulders, and I skied him to where the snowmobile was going to be. Now, it wasn't perfect. He was still bleeding, but it slowed it down. And we were way out there.
Yeah.
But we all did enough to get it done. And it wasn't one tool. It was like a lot of little things.
It wasn't perfect, right? But you had knowledge, and you knew you needed to do something. And let's be honest, to call somebody and wait for help, your dog wouldn't be here today.
No.
But you knew enough to at least slow the bleeding.
Yep.
And say, hey, this is what I can do right now, and now we need to get out of here to hire medical care. And so controlling bleeding and understanding how to do that, and just having some simple tools, but more importantly in my mind, the knowledge you have in your brain, right, to go, I have to do something, it's got to be immediate, here's some tools that'll help me.
Yep.
It's critical, right? Because these things do happen very often.
And I always think about improving this situation step by step. You're not going to immediately fix everything. But if you can start improving the situation, that does a lot for your psychology, because you start calming down, your adrenaline goes down, you start thinking more clearly, and then you might find other solutions.
Right.
So for me, it's always like, what's step one? Okay, let's do this. Let's step two, let's do that. And when we build all of our products at Uncharted, we try to give people step-by-step instructions, because we've found, and research shows, when you start going down the right path, things get clearer, things get easier, you start going in the right direction.
Yeah. Having these things and an understanding and thinking through them, and then just making sure you have some basic tools.
Yep.
And some basic knowledge, like either with that wrap or some quick clot gauze, or, you know, even just some basic, you know, gauze bandages, and thinking through that and having that capability can really go a long way in potentially saving somebody's life. But these are kind of things that you want to talk through with your partner and kind of build out in each person's individual kit. What am I realistically going to run into based on my experience, my partner's experience, and the environment we're in and the activity we're going to participate in? And that's going to keep it small and manageable. And when you pull things out and you use them and expend them, then when you come back from the trip, that you make sure that you restock them. And then as your skill set grows and your experience grows, that this kit continues to evolve with you over time.
The one thing I would add is, when we think about our kits, I don't only think about first aid, I think about gear repair as well. So we interviewed a ton of outdoor professionals. What we found was most times when there was an injury, there was like a gear failure beforehand. So if you think about maybe your ski binding breaks and now you're post-holing out and the sun goes down and you're cold and you can't find your way home. Or it might just be a shoelace breaks and you roll your ankle. I mean, there's a lot of things like that. So when we build our kits, we think of them as a starting point. And to your point, where are you going? What's the environment? What are your personal medical needs? Have that stuff. There's no way you can just go out and buy something and that's going to be all inclusive for you, because nobody knows who you are.
It's not just when I go on a backcountry hunt. It's not just when I go on an overnighter. Like, that med kit goes with me backcountry skiing and climbing and hiking, you know, or training. and then hunting. And so my point is, year round, I'm in that thing. I'm working from it, right? For me in a backpack, like these are individual kits that each individual carries. And the reason being, and you know, maybe this was just, you know, trained into me, but if you get hurt, I'm going to use your med kit. And there's two reasons why. One, because you may have things in there that you need. Maybe it's an allergy pill, or you know, an EpiPen, or some kind of like pain medication, or you know, you're allergic to sulfa, so you need something else that I don't. Secondly, I treat you with your kit, and now I say, hey, I'm gonna, you know, you broke your ankle, I'm gonna bundle you up, you're safe, you're sound, I got, you know, your grid coordinate, we've got help coming, but I'm gonna go down to the water source, meet them, I'll be back by morning. What if I get hurt?
Right.
Now I've expended my med kit on you. So every person has to be self-sufficient.
Right. We live in a world where there's an easy button for everything. People just assume that somebody else is going to fix the problem, but especially in hunting scenarios and Western hunting, or the world that we're kind of living in and it's changing, I think you really have to be, like we always say, be the hero of your own story.
I love that. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, you're the main character in your book, and what kind of person do you want to be in that book?
Yeah.
Like, I want to be a person that not only takes care of myself, but can help other people.
Yeah.
And if we all have that mentality, we're going to be okay.
It's not a question of if, it's a question of when.
Right.
And the longer you do it, the odds of it happening begin to improve. And, you know, I know people just in the last couple of years where, you know, an arrow's fallen out of a quiver, somebody stabbed themselves in the calf, they needed to get a tourniquet and be carried out. That happened twice in 1 year, I think, to people I knew, right? What you have control over is not maybe them happening as much as what is your actions and how prepared are you when it happens to kind of limit the severity and the outcome of that. And that's where, to your point, like, be the hero of your own story. Like, I kind of planned for this, and now I'm capable of managing the situation.
Absolutely. It doesn't have to be a massive, massive thing that happens. Everybody here knows what like a hot spot in your boot can do.
Oh.
If you're on your feet 15 miles a day with a heavy pack, it
Yeah.
ruins it.
Yeah.
So there's these little things that can just completely change the outcome of what you're trying to accomplish.
Right.
It doesn't have to be an earthquake or an alien invasion
Right.
or an arrow in your femoral artery. It can be very little.
People are like, oh, you must have a huge med kit because you got all this medical experience and all this, you know, trauma and combat field triage. And I'm like, no, actually I don't, right? So I try not to what if it to death. I try to plan for common contingencies for the environment, my experience level, etc. Right? I've taken this and then personalized it to make sure that it meets my needs and my demands. But people are like, man, it must be big. And I'm like, no, it's actually not. Like this and this combined, they go together.
Yep.
This is my entire possibles pouch. With this, I can start a fire, build a shelter, manage any medical emergency, right? And like that's what I've learned with over the years. Obviously, I've got some experience, but people are kind of surprised when they see that. But again, that's what I'm carrying in my pack. But I also have, to your point, a much broader capability when I come back to my vehicle. So it's like, hey, I got a package and leave you. I can go back to my truck. I'll come back with a splint. I can come back and do more while we're waiting on help. But I'm not going to carry that in the field because that's unrealistic.
Well, and that's what happens is you might have a first aid kit in the truck, or you might take it to camp, but then, you know, you're at camp, you leave in the morning, you're 4 miles from camp when something happens. You have to have the thing on you and then be able to get back to better and better help, in my opinion. So I do the exact same thing. I mean, I have the same kit. I've got some things. I mean, you have a little hip pack. Like, this is our hip pack that we make, and I've got that same kit right here with some other things in there as well. This thing fits on me. I forget I have it on. My back can breathe, I can move fast, I can bow hunt, I can fly fish, I can mountain bike, I can run. And it's all right there. And so that's always my first step. And then from there, you know, it just gets bigger. So this is a little bit bigger. This might sit at camp. If you've got 5 or 6 guys around, this sits at camp, so you have more coverage. Just a bigger kit. And you can go all the way back to, these drawers are full of all sorts of stuff.
Got this small capability in my pack. Then I've got a much, you know, a broader capability if I'm, say, at a fixed camp, right? Maybe we got taken in by horses. And then I've got a broader capability in my vehicle. And all that is leading me back to a higher level of care, right? If and when it's called for that. But, you know, oftentimes it's not. But it's nice to have that at your disposal because when you have that, you can kind of relax. And you tend not to panic and make poor decisions that can really lead to some catastrophic outcomes. So it's all about to me, that planning and preparation.
I find with our business and talking to people about these products, the people that I don't have to convince are military, are fire, they're EMTs, because they've seen it, they've been through it, and they're like, I don't want that to happen and be unprepared. It's the people that have probably never gotten out there, maybe are starting, and they just don't even understand how many things can happen in the wild or on an adventure that we've had experience with.
Yeah. No, I think this was a great overview just to kind of, paint with a broad brush of, some of the capabilities that we have, that we like to carry, things that have served us well over the years, and that I think more people just need to be aware of and prepare for, for again, not if, but when. And then when it happens, it's kind of at that point up to you to kind of manage and see it through.
I want to shift people from being reactive to proactive.
That's
I
great.
think that's like the most important thing in our society is we are very comfortable most of the time, and that works until it doesn't. So if we can get people to be proactive about this and think about it, it's going to change a game. It's going to make your situation better no matter what.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. What do we have in the vehicle now to give us even more capability that we couldn't possibly realistically carry on our back into the mountains?
Right. So again, it depends on what you're doing, where you're going. I change out these drawers every season.
Okay.
So the winter looks a lot different than the summer, looks a lot different than the fall, because I'm doing different activities. So I do think about that, and I swap these things out, which also helps me get eyes on batteries. Maybe they got some water in there, something happened. Just a good time to check everything.
Yeah.
I also keep things in the cab. So I've got a firearm, I've got a knife, I've got a small first aid kit, I've got a tourniquet, all really close. What if you roll your truck going somewhere and you can't get back to this stuff? So now you've got some stuff there that not only can help you kind of bridge that again as if you were out hunting, but it might also help you break through these windows and get to the stuff in the back.
Sometimes people say, oh, you're just paranoid. And I say, no. Because it's not a question of if, but when. And paranoia is not preparedness. We're prepared, we're not paranoid.
Right.
And when you are prepared, you don't need to be paranoid, and you just build for realistic contingencies that happen day to day.
Absolutely. And with modern vehicles, there's tons of storage. I guarantee you have spots in your vehicle where you could put plenty of stuff, and it's not going to be rolling around the back or taking up space so you can't get your kids in. There's plenty of space.
This last winter, I remember distinctly, it was a hard winter across the country, and it was so tragic to see Buffalo, New York, and get all that snow, and I distinctly remember one woman in particular, and she died in her vehicle on her way home from work because the snow was such that she couldn't continue to drive. She pulled to the side of the road. The temperatures, were extremely cold, and she had no capability within her car, and nobody came by to help her. If you'd have just thrown another jacket, or if you'd have just put a sleeping bag, something just simple like that.
But that doesn't have to happen.
And so, people think, oh, it's got to be this crazy thing like, a hurricane comes through, or, a volcano erupts. And it's like, no, it could just be a snowstorm and you driving home from work.
This is my base camp.
There you go.
Because I travel a lot, I'm hunting, I'm doing all sorts of activities, and I'm closer to this truck than I am my home most days. So this has to be sufficient enough to get me through. And that's the way I look at it.
Yeah.
And I just use the space, and I feel very confident about what's in here. So this is my truck, this is my base camp. I typically change things out every quarter based on seasons, but it might be something where I know I'm going hunting for 2 weeks, and then I repack this whole thing because I know specifically where I'm going and what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But generally, this thing is full, ready for whatever I come across, either for me or to help somebody else out. So I'd be interested in your perspective too on what's in here. But the way I do this is I have this deck system, which I really like, and then I arrange things from most likely or things you want to grab quickest to kind of in the back here, there's a shovel and a sleeping bag and tents. So if we're going to be here a while, I'm going to dig all that out. But I don't want all the quick stuff back there and slowing me down. The first thing that we didn't actually talk about either is just communication. There's a little Garmin inReach. I love this little thing. And it's not for navigation, it's for communication. So I can turn this thing on, hit SOS, and somebody's coming. Or I can just send a note to whoever's at home and just say, hey, I'm 2 hours behind, don't worry, I'm gonna be there. Or I'm at this spot, I have a broken leg, I'm okay, but can you come help? So for me, this is a really important piece that I think everybody should have.
You could be driving down a major freeway in the US and not have cell service.
Right.
And more often than not, interestingly enough, especially out west, like, you don't have cell service often when you need it.
Right.
And so having that, and I have that in my vehicle as well, it's just that assurance that I can at least communicate to somebody else, you know, to either
Absolutely.
come help me or, hey, I'm okay, don't worry.
Then in here I've got layers. I've got waterproof jackets packed up. I've got skincare stuff. I've got some hydration tablets. As you know, hydration's not just water, it's minerals. If you're really cooking, you're drinking a bunch of water, you're gonna be crampy, there's gonna be a lot of things there. So I've got that because I sweat a lot personally. I've got multiple headlamps. Yeah, I mean there might be 3 people in the car, we all gotta work, right? You got one headlamp that might slow you down, and a bunch of body wipes, you know? Nature might call or might be cleaning a wound or anything else, but antibacterial. I've got some stuff for my dog in here. I've got lights, I've got sunscreen, I've got duct tape, bug spray, I've got bear spray, I've got a little bivvy, and then I've got some marking tape in case I have to leave my truck. I could leave a breadcrumb trail if somebody pulls up and I've gone to find help, and they'd be like, oh, let's follow the pink ribbon. Inside this kit right here, this box, is it's more cold weather stuff, but I've got some traction stuff for 2 sets of boots, not just one. I've got a bunch of hand warmers, I've got food, I've got utensils, I've got a stove to cook it, and again, I've got more like dried jackets. If you're cold and you're wet, you're not gonna get warm.
Right.
So having these layers, it might be raining, you have to move, and you didn't plan on it, you've got jackets in here. So I always think about that. The next thing, I've got a couple different axes in here. I've got just a standard axe, I've got another knife, and then I've got this little tool here, which is pretty cool. I don't know if you've seen one of these. It's got a saw blade in the handle. It's got a glass breaker. It's got a seatbelt cutter, which probably wouldn't be very effective back here, a hammer, and then another axe. So just a nice tool. Maybe you get in some brush and you've got to cut some things out. Snowmobiling, I have one of these in my snowmobile for cutting brush and things like that. Last but not least, in this shelf here, this is a deck system that my company built with Decked. And this is basically a 2-person survival kit. It's the same thing as in this bag here, with a battery jump starter for your vehicle. So I've got this battery jump starter. This, you don't need jumper cables ever again. You come back from a long hunt, you left the dome light on, you don't have cell service, 20 seconds you're on the road. That's a really nice thing. It's got USB ports, it has a flashlight. The flashlight has SOS and other flash kind of patterns. So let's say you're broken down the road, you could set this out as a traffic cone, let people know there's something up ahead. Yeah. So a lot of really cool use cases in this.
And dead batteries, coming back to trailheads and finding trucks dead and nobody else around, like that's happened to me like several times.
It happens a ton.
What I like about the vehicle-borne kit and the way you've built this out, it's not just for you, and it's maybe not even just for you and your passenger, right? You may come across an accident where you're like, hey, I need to break glass to get this person out. I need to cut their seatbelt. This person's going hypothermic because it's in the middle of winter and their car broke down. I can rewarm them. And so it's not just about you, it's about being a good citizen and like helping people you may come across who maybe don't have the same capability and knowledge that you do. Now you become that asset to the community, and that's a huge thing that I don't think people think about.
I fully agree. When I started this company, I did a lot of research, and Sigmund Freud was most famous for talking about survival of the fittest, but what he spent most of his time on was the power of community. And whether it was bringing down a woolly mammoth or fighting off an invading army, the only way humans got through anything was working together. And so that really stuck with me, because where I grew up in Wisconsin, if there was a tornado, my family went out with chainsaws and helped. So yeah, I do think about others. I think about my own family and friends and whoever's in this truck, but it can work for whoever you find.
Yeah, and folks like us who have that experience, it's almost like it's our responsibility to not only educate other people, but to be prepared. And if more people do that, then to your point, the community benefits from that, right?
Absolutely.
And I think that's often overlooked when we talk about these things as personal, and it's well beyond personal at this level.
Yep.
When you're talking about, you know, vehicle preparedness.
Absolutely. This was custom for this week, so we were shooting guns. I've got 2 rifles in here, but I've also got some tow straps tucked in here. I've got some extra little gas things for my stove. I've got a little sleeping bag right here. I've got a toiletry kit, and then a Ziploc of just all sorts of stuff. I've got tons of batteries in here. I've got whiskey, I've got zip ties, I've got glow sticks, hand warmers, duct tape, paracord, just kind of a catch-all.
And then, like you said, you're kind of changing this out either on the trip or the environment or the seasonality.
In the winter, this is going to be a lot of warmth.
Yeah.
So a couple sleeping bags, like more fuel, things like that, right? In the summer, I mean, I do have some water right here. I don't have it all in here right now, but I usually have one of those Yeti silos full of water strapped in here.
That's in the summer, like we are right now. It's 100 degrees.
Yeah.
boy, water is going to be your number one thing after trying to seek some shelter with shade.
Yep.
Yeah.
Again, it's not overcomplicated, but I think it's going to make a difference when the time comes.
Yeah. No, this is fantastic, just to show, you know, how you can take the same idea, the same concepts from, you know, a small med kit in your pack, and then, you know, as you say, these concentric circles of capability, right? Increase your preparedness, and then if in a medical emergency, to get you to a higher medical care, or to, you know, if you're not helping yourself, helping your neighbor.
Yeah, look, I'm not a doctor. There's a lot of things I probably won't be able to fix, but if I can slow it down and I know that I've got some stuff to like help them here, and then I know how to drive this truck and get them to a hospital, like I think that's the best thing I can do, instead of pretend that I know how to fix.
Well,
stitch
just
somebody
like
up
what
or whatever.
happened to your dog, right?
Right.
You knew enough to stabilize and then get them somewhere.
Exactly.
Yeah. No,
Exactly.
fantastic.
Yeah, so thanks for watching. I've learned a lot today from you. I always do, and I think that's the important thing, is always be learning, always be getting better. So whether you pick up these products or something else, just think about where you're going, who you're with, what your capabilities are, what might happen, and don't be a statistic, right? You want to make sure that you're going to be the hero and save the day if something happens.
Yeah, everybody's looking for, you know, what's the perfect thing, and the reality is, when we go out into this untamed, you know, environment, this backcountry, it's not that. And so the best thing you can do is have some tools, have some knowledge, and understand that, you know, things may happen, things probably will happen at a certain point, and the better prepared you are, the better you can manage that.
Yep.
And so, you know, there's more tools than ever, there's more information than ever, and really there's no excuse not to be prepared and be self-sufficient.
Absolutely. So have fun out there. You don't have to be paranoid, just be prepared. Thanks for watching.